The latest WikiLeaks expose is causing uproar in diplomatic circles around the world. And now in royal circles here. The secret diplomatic cables detailed Prince Andrew's reportedly rude and scathing comments about the press and the Serious Fraud Office, who investigate corruption, and all done with a cocky demeanour. The leaks, all 250,000 of them, have been roundly condemned. The US tonight saying the laying bare of some brutally candid American views of foreign leaders and dignitaries has put lives and security at risk. Our international editor Lindsey Hilsum has this report.
Prince Andrew promoting British business at home and abroad. And at a dinner for British business people in Kyrgyzstan, according to the American ambassador, insulting journalists, the French and the Serious Fraud Office, which investigated a British-Saudi arms deal. She wrote, he railed at British anti-corruption investigators who had had the idiocy of almost scuttling the Al Yamama deal with Saudi Arabia, adding, his mother's subjects seated round the table roared their approval. He then went on to those journalists, especially from the National Guardian, who poke their noses everywhere and make it harder for British businessmen to do business. The crowd practically clapped. The US Secretary of State today tried to cover her embarrassment at the revelation of such indiscretions.
The United States deeply regrets the disclosure of any information that was intended to be confidential, including private discussions between counterparts or our diplomats' personal assessments and observations. I want to make clear that our official foreign policy is not set through these messages, but here in Washington.
Arab leaders seem to have been very frank with American diplomats on what they really think about Iran. King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia said, Iran's goal is to cause problems. May God prevent us from falling victim to their evil. King Hamad of Bahrain is reported to have said Iran's nuclear program must be stopped. The danger of letting it go on is greater than the danger of stopping it. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates is quoted as saying, Ahmadinejad is Hitler. And Saad Hariri, the Lebanese Prime Minister, said while the war in Iraq was unnecessary, Iran is necessary. Mr. Hariri found himself in Tehran today on a visit to strengthen bilateral relations. Iran backs Hezbollah, the faction of Mr. Hariri's government which would dearly like to unseat him. So he's in the uncomfortable position of pretending that his enemies are his friends. He met the supreme leader, while Iran's president was busy dismissing the WikiLeaks revelations as an American plot.
All the countries in the region are friends with each other. Such mischief will have no impact on relations between states.
Car bombs in Tehran this morning targeted 2 Iranian nuclear scientists. One was killed. The government automatically blamed Israel, but the list of suspects must surely be long. Most Arab countries fear Iran's nuclear program, and the Iranian government fears there's an enemy within giving away their nuclear secrets. The WikiLeaks revelations play into the hands of the Israelis, who feel vindicated.
The chief danger to world peace comes from the Iranian regime's arming and aggression. The important thing is that more countries, governments and leaders in the Middle East understand that this is the fundamental threat. There's a gap between what leaders say in closed meetings and what is said publicly, especially in our region.
Iran's new Mesab missile tested last week. The cables revealed that the US believes that North Korea has supplied Iran with missile technology based on Russian designs. That it has on several occasions requested the government in Beijing to stop Chinese companies from providing nuclear or missile-related technology. And it even has its suspicions about a British company allegedly evading sanctions. An Iranian writer exiled to London is cited in one cable. He told the Americans he was being stalked. The man, who apparently worked for Iranian intelligence, was later arrested for the attempted murder of another Iranian exile in the US. Dr. Nourizadeh doesn't mind exposure, but knows others will.
It is damaging the American policy. Nobody would trust the United States. I'm sure to know Middle East and the mentality, majority of the kings and president, they would think, oh, why should we talk to American when next day or next year, whatever we said in secret is going to be public.
Today, President Obama carefully said nothing about WikiLeaks.
Good morning, everybody.
The problem for him is not only that WikiLeaks has made secrets public, but that the cables lay bare the hypocrisy and dissembling of diplomacy, making America's already testy relations with its allies more fraught than ever.
Lindsey Hilsum, we're joined now from Dubai by the former Foreign Office Minister and former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Lord Malloch Brown. Mark Malloch Brown, were you spied on?
Well, I always assumed so, and to be honest, in that sense, there's a bit of humbug about this story, because go back a few years and Claire Short, after she left government, alleged that she had read as a cabinet minister reports of Kofi Annan, the then UN Secretary General, and my boss's conversations. So, and frankly, going back way before that to the origins of the United Nations, it's always been a great centre of spying. And part of what this story is about is how spying's changed, because what's alleged now is that, you know, different financial data should be gathered about diplomats and other data of electronic character to identify them and their movements. In the old days, you just imagined there was someone in the shadows following you down Fifth Avenue in New York, but it's now a rather more electronic model, but certainly one which seems highly intrusive and offensive in the way it's been described in these cables.
Well, I thought until you said the word offensive that it was all fair in love and war, that in some way one should just accept this. But surely, however much you may have speculated that you were being spied upon, the very fact that it appears that this may well be a proven fact, action should perhaps be taken against the United States, perhaps.
Well, look, I think it's, I think it's really important to expose this, because, I have felt, frankly, throughout my involvement in the UN and in foreign policy, that we should try to make the world of the UN a no-spy zone in a way, because the UN is owned by all of us, and those who work for it serve all governments. And, frankly, the argument that the United States has made today about needing private, confidential space to carry out diplomacy is even truer for those of us in the UN who had to try and find common ground between very different points of view, and therefore needed that private space to try and work out the points of agreement and not expect to constantly be exposed and have different countries looking over our shoulders. But what I would say is, sorry.
Yeah, well, but then you cast yourself as you were as a British Foreign Office Minister, and had you been in post before the Iraq War, it was urgently necessary to the Blair administration to know how members of the UN Security Council were going to vote. And there's always been the suspicion that there was a bit of spookery at work there. Now, what surely is interesting in these documents is that it seems to be commonplace for ordinary diplomats, not CIA, not necessarily MI6, but ordinary diplomats to be engaged in espionage.
Well, I think that's where a real line has been crossed, because, there is always meant to be a significant difference between your regular diplomats and your spies, and that's critical to the conduct of foreign relations, that you can develop a relationship of trust with your counterpart on the other side and not expect that he's squinting to take a look at your credit card number so that they can track your whereabouts in future. But, again, I do want to be clear, it's the US that is on the line today, and because the UN is in New York, there's no doubt a disproportionate part of what goes on is directed by the US, but it would be utterly unfair to say that this behavior is peculiar to America alone. China, Russia, many others take advantage of this. And, so I think on all sides, some kind of a pact, non-aggression pact to leave the UN to get on with its job would be a really helpful step forward in global trust building.
Lord Malloch Brown, thank you very much indeed for joining us.